I've waited 2.5 years for this moment. Not this particular moment, just playing the game. Playing the game I've been waiting for since June of 2019, which feels like 5 years ago, but it's really only 2.5. But after all this time, it's finally here. I get to make the build that I really liked in Dark Souls 3 and just recreate it in Elden Ring. And now that I've done it, I really just kind of look back and I was like, oh wow, I waited 2.5 years to play the exact same way I already did. So that's neat. Anyways, I've tried my best to recreate like the fashion and the overall vibe of my favorite build that I made for Dark Souls 3. This is Huntress Yurie. She is a frost build that invades Raya Lucaria. And a frost build feels like the natural progression of this build from the last game, where they were an intelligence build that didn't really cast sorceries. And that was due in large part to me bouncing off of sorceries in that game, which I don't anticipate will be the case in Elden Ring, but for now I'm sticking to what this character was originally supposed to be about. So let me start off by saying, just man, how fun PvP in this game has been. Like, recording this video right now makes me a little bit irate because it's time that I could be playing more Elden Ring instead of recording this video. And it's just non-stop. It's like all I think about, and it's so much goddamn fun. The jump button is a very welcome addition to not just traversal, but also to PvP. It allows for 2 new types of attacks per weapon. There are also drastically fewer true combos in this game, which is a change I just love. It makes finding those new true combos a lot more interesting than before, and this build kind of plays into that. But I'll get to that once I start talking about frost weapons. My only real complaints so far have been that connections at the moment are a little spotty, with frequent disconnects from phantoms in the world. Not on purpose, I don't think. I think it's like legitimate connection errors. But there are plenty of hosts who still DC once their phantom gets killed and you've got them down to low health. That much has not changed from Dark Souls 3. Some other oddities I've noticed is that there's now a slightly longer delay between when the host enters the boss fog room and when you get booted out of the world, which allowed me to kill this phantom right here. And that bug where you can invade a world where the host is currently fighting the boss and you can't touch them is once again active in this game. It's just not all that often, but it does make invading areas right in front of boss fog walls a little bit irritating. But yeah, those are my main complaints. I know there are some balance issues and some exploits that will probably be patched out in the future, but I'm mainly happy that the biggest issues from Dark Souls 3 like the Estus cancel and bow glitch are now gone, and hopefully we'll never have to see them again. I want to talk a little bit more about new mechanics that Elden Ring introduced to PvP, but I'll talk about that more towards the end of this video. For now, let's talk more about this build. So what is a frost build in Elden Ring? Well, frost is an infusion that you can give your weapon that gives you a decent amount of magic damage and scaling with intelligence, but then also leaves your physical scaling stats mostly intact as well, making it ideal for intelligence and physical hybrid builds. I would show you my stats, but they are horrifically optimized due to me picking the wrong starting class. All you really need to know is that I have 40 vigor, well, 35, with +5 from Radagon's Sword Seal, and 20/20 in both dexterity and intelligence. That stat spread is so I can use Astel's Wing, which is a very fun curved sword that fires short-range projectiles on its R2s for no FP cost. It's honestly a pretty mediocre weapon at this level, but the projectiles are quite good at interrupting heals, and they fire off pretty quickly, and charging the R2 up to almost full fires 2 projectiles. My main weapon that I'm using on this is the Knight Greatsword, which to my knowledge is the longest greatsword in the game. Two-handed greatswords no longer get hyper armor outside of whatever passive poise you might already have, so to me their only use will be their wider swinging arcs when one-handed. I've found that infusing greatswords with frost tends to be a much better strategy for proccing it than obtaining a greatsword with innate frost. For reference, an infused greatsword with frost gets 95 frost buildup per hit, compared to Death's Poker, which has innate frost buildup of 65, and the Moonlight Greatsword, which has an innate frost buildup of 55. This means that at most, I just have to hit someone 3 times with a greatsword in order for frost to proc. For anyone who is slightly newer to PvP, I'll give a quick breakdown of frost right now. Frost-infused weapons build up the frost status effect on your opponent. When that status bar fills up, the frost procs, which deals a decent chunk of damage to your opponent, and then also slows your opponent's stamina recovery and makes them take slightly more damage for a period of time. But this leads to one of my favorite new mechanics in Elden Ring. Proccing any sort of status effect in this game gives you an extra hit, like a guaranteed true combo. Now, I know you blood build edgelords out there are going to get all hot and bothered by this, so go off, have fun with it. But this property also applies to Frost, Poison, and Rot. So when you proc Frost on someone, they are already taking damage from that first hit of whatever weapon you hit them with, plus the Frost proccing damage, and then you're guaranteed one more hit after that. And because damage in this game is so high at almost every level, that can take someone from 75 to 50% to 0 in a very short period of time. Due to this mechanic, I'm getting a lot of kills on turn burns, and also a fair amount of double kills, far more than I ever did in Dark Souls 3. I've also been using the Ash of War Chilling Mist on the Greatsword. It's basically like a slightly slower version of Bloody Slash in that it has enough hyper armor to tank through one-handed lighter weapons like straight swords, katanas, and then also deals a good amount of damage if it hits. But another nice property of this is that it also imbues your weapon with additional frost buildup and creates a cloud of frost building mist in front of you. So if you don't proc frost on the slash from Chilling Mist, it will almost definitely proc from them just standing in the cloud of mist in front of you. It helps with area control, but is pretty difficult to land when you're being pressured. So my advice for this is just stick to using it from neutral, as it is slower than people think, so they mistime it. It has decent tracking and allows you a little bit of area denial, which to me is always quite helpful, especially in these tight corridors of Raya Lucaria. Speaking of which, let's talk a little bit about Raya Lucaria. I'd say it's one of my favorite legacy dungeons in this game, but it's also this game's Grand Archives, which is yet another reason I had to recreate my Dark Souls 3 character here. I also love Raya Lucaria because it's a lot like Hogwarts. It's a magical castle school where the inhabitants are idiots who don't give a shit about the safety of any of its students. Thus, this place is filled with stuff like the Indiana Jones Ball and a very angry Sif the Great Grey Wolf reference. But actually I really love that boss. Real quick though, can we talk about how good the Indiana Jones Ball is? Like just in the middle of this Academy for Soul Arts that is supposed to be a place of learning, they put a giant rolling ball that just crashes down the steps. I mean, this thing is constantly one-shotting hosts and phantoms, which is more of an indictment of how much people put into health in this game, but I really don't mind. There is no greater joy than seeing your opponent getting flattened by a giant Indiana Jones ball. And no, I refuse to call it anything else but the Indiana Jones ball, so stop asking. I will say though, it is very important to be careful with the rafters to get onto that walkway. I learned the hard way that certain gravity spells will just pull you right off and you'll just plummet to your death. Do you remember the Scholars in the Grand Archives in Dark Souls 3? How they would die to 2 hits from literally anything in the game, and take 5-minute breaks between casting spells that do no damage? Well, these Scholars of Raya Lucaria subscribe to a different school of magic. It's the magical philosophy of get pelted by magic until you die, and then keep getting pelted while you watch your corpse die on the ground. These Burger King looking dudes are awesome. They're sorta tanky, and they each fire their soul arrows in groups of 3. So if you're in range of 2 Burger Kings, you're going to get hit at least once by their barrage of soul arrows. Oh, and there's a pot boy that will sometimes get involved and flatten your opponents in ceramic glory. I really love this pot boy, and if you start invading here, so will you. But I'm just very glad that the library intelligence level in this game has very good PvE in it. Let's talk about some of the new mechanics Elden Ring has implemented specifically for PvP. Elden Ring has changed up backstabs a little bit, so now it's much more difficult to backstab players who are moving, so stuff like roll and punish backstabs no longer work. The grab box for backstab seems to be much more narrow in general, so players are going to have to be more precise when going for a backstab. That being said, it's still incredibly easy to punish sloppy and ill-timed heals. Healing via spells is still as easy as ever to punish. I get this particular phantom a couple of times trying to heal themselves and their host. I don't know if this is an actual change or not, but I feel like it's also easier to backstab punish people chugging from their flasks, but that might just be because I'm fighting a ton of brand new players who don't know to turn their characters and hide their backs when they drink. I recall in the network test it was nearly impossible to punish parry spam due to the backstab grab boxes being particularly broken or too narrow. I don't quite know what the issue was, but that's definitely been changed. I will say in general that you have to be more precise when backstabbing. Here I go for a backstab on the parry spam, due in large part to the fact that they only had a great bow in their main hand. But I think the key here is to be decisive and very precise about when you're backstabbing and when you're not. I mentioned jumping a tiny bit earlier in this video, but it really does change the game for me here. Level design is now far more wide open and vertical now that you can hop over railings onto unseen ledges. I had this whole encounter with this party where we were firing projectiles back and forth through this broken cathedral window, and having the positioning that I did here was a huge advantage, due in large part to this lip of the window that you need to jump over in order to cross it. So I essentially had cover against them and their projectiles, while also being able to easily see them, whereas their vision was partially obscured and their firing path obstructed by this lip of the window. And while they had to fall back on firing arrows from no cover, I could hit them from my cover using Cuckoo Glintstone, which is a thrown projectile that breaks into 3 additional projectiles. One of the phantoms put on the bubble tears from the Flask of Physic, and it didn't matter at all because I could hit them with the thrown part of the Cuckoo Glintstone to pop the bubble, and then follow that up with 3 additional shards that hit them. After this little range battle went on for a while, I was able to catch one of the phantoms off guard and Frostproc true combo them to death, then used pure skill, to swing my greatsword 4 times in a row to clear the area out and finish the host with my offstop. Well, it's actually Rogier's Rapier, but you get the point. But this whole encounter was due to the jump button, because if the jump button didn't exist, they wouldn't have designed this broken window to have a lip on it that I could use as cover, and I bet there are countless other examples of this kind of level design throughout the game that we just haven't tapped into. But my praise of the jump button does not stop there. Jumping attacks are a really great tool to use against opponents who just want to backpedal. You know, the guy who just fires their spells and they back up and they fire their spells, or they back up and they turn and burn once, and they back up and they turn and burn again. The Greatsword jumping R2s solve all of my problems with these people. They have a lot of range, a deceptive amount of range I'd say, and jumping forward extends that range quite a bit, making them more difficult to space out properly. And just a PSA, jumping attacks cannot be parried on any weapon. So if you encounter a 50-50 player, you know, just a complete parry spammer, jump attacks are going to serve you very well. When gathering gear for invasions, I was hoping to find like some sort of obscuring ring equivalent in this game, so I could shoot people in the face with a great bow from a distance without being seen. But as it turns out, the only obscuring ring equivalent is the Concealing Veil, which, despite the awesome sounding name, only conceals your location if you are crouching outside of lock-on range. And unfortunately, you cannot fire great bows in this game while crouching. So that's what I'm trying to do in this clip, only lock-on range is quite large in this game, and they definitely already saw me. But it's nothing some good old-fashioned elevator invader shenanigans won't solve. The good news is that there definitely is an Untrue Darkring equivalent, and I will be wearing that on every build, and you cannot stop me. I would have easily conceded not wearing the Untrue Darkring if they had just made invaders a little bit less red, but no, we are once again covered from head to toe in this bright red paint that I just find so ugly. And like, I put all this work into my fashion, I choose very specific pieces that work with other specific pieces, and I even coordinated the weapons to have a little bit of like hints of red on them to match the feather on the Dielos mask. I'm over it. It's called the Host's Trick Mirror. You can buy it from the Finger Maidens, and I'm wearing it. The last thing I wanted to cover with all these new mechanics is the whole like damage is too high issue. I noticed after recording all of these clips that all of these invasions lasted around 1 to 2 minutes, which is quite unlike Dark Souls 3, where invasions would vary all over the place from 1 to 2 minutes, but also typically 3 to 4, sometimes even stretching into 10. And I think the damage being higher is ultimately a good change because it's more in line with what Miyazaki intended invasions to be, which is just an obstacle in the level. Miyazaki once described his vision for invaders as being a particularly tough enemy in the level. And of course invaders are, they're real players. But in Dark Souls 3 the damage was really not high enough so that the time to kill a player was quite high as a result as well. This led to all these nasty wars of attrition where you could never quite put away the host, but the host could just outlast the invader. An invader shouldn't have to run a host and their phantoms out of every single healing item before they can finally put them down. And the thing is that no tough enemies in the PvE do that either. Think back to some of the tougher non-boss enemies you faced in any of From Software's games. Have any of them ever run you entirely out of healing items? No, they either kill you in a timely fashion because they are aggressive or deal enough damage, or you end up killing them. An encounter with a field or level enemy never takes up 10 minutes of your time fighting a war of attrition, and according to Miyazaki's vision, neither should invaders. Invaders are obstacles, not large time sinks where you fight someone who inevitably makes a rude gesture at your corpse to make themselves feel better about spending that much time fighting you. In this game, it seems like you often either nuke the party or the party nukes you, and I'm very okay with that. I don't want to get drawn into these boring invasions against passive players that go on for longer than 5 minutes. Those invasions were never really all that fun to me in the first place. And the thing is, this is exactly what Miyazaki had said about invasions in Elden Ring when asked about them in an earlier interview. He said he wanted to make them less annoying for all parties involved. It's why FromSoft gave us a compass to locate the hosts, but it's also why he made damage higher, to avoid these long, drawn-out passive grudge matches. And to those complaining that this is just a loading screen simulator, the good news is that loading times are pretty low now. This isn't Bloodborne, where you'll be stuck staring at an item description for 15 to 20 seconds every single time you hit a loading screen. And look, the bottom line is that loading screens are fast, and activity is pretty fast right now. There are so many people to invade right now. If you really don't enjoy playing loading screen simulator, then try hosting. Try hosting with the Taunter's Tongue on and without a rune arc active. It is a lot of fun. So yeah, I'm really loving this period of time right now. Activity is constant everywhere at practically every level. There are definitely some balance issues, as there are with any From Software game at launch, but nobody has figured out what's truly meta just yet, although there are definitely people who are already just copying whatever they see G9 doing. But don't worry about it, they tend to be bad at the game anyways, just like they were in Dark Souls 3. I'm so excited for this new era of Souls PvP, and I hope you are too. These games are officially no longer niche, they are as mainstream as can be, and you can expect the PvP community to grow with it. And I welcome everyone to the wonderful world of invading and From Software games. If you can get past the jank, you'll find an experience unparalleled to any other. So with all that being said, thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you in the next one.